Now, not all of the participants in the Donner Party participated in cannibalism, thankfully for that. How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Maple Monkey Stories. I'm going to get into a little bit of an off-grid adventure, quite honestly, gruesome story, if I may add that. It's pretty crazy. This story is called The Donner Party, and before I jump right into it, it involves a group of Americans back in right around the 1850s, and this was back when people were heading across the United States going over to California. The Donner Party was getting ready to leave and head over the California Trail. The only problem with this is, with heading over the California Trail, is there's a very, very narrow window that you have to hit it by. If you miss it on one end, you're going to hit snow going up through the mountains, and if you miss it on the other end, then the problem is your animals, they're not going to have food, because obviously there's no cars back in the 1850s. Pack animals were a necessity. So if you missed it, if you left too soon, the grass and the flowers and all the clovers and everything that grow in the fields that the pack animals eat, that's not going to be grown, so your animals aren't going to have any food for them. And if you leave too late, then you're going to be cutting it getting close to winter, where you're going to be going over the California mountains, and it's just going to be snowstorms, and it may actually be impassable. So there's a very fine line, very fine window that you have to hit to get on the California Trail. They say that the sweet spot for getting onto the trail is around mid to late April, but for whatever reason, the Donner Party didn't get away around then, though. They got off around May 12th. So they were about a month away from that prime location, that prime time to get started to going across the California Trail. They were the last pioneer train to leave in the spring of 1846, and since they left about a month past when they should have, then that means they absolutely had almost no margin for error. They had to absolutely hit everything with pinpoint accuracy, going through all the states and all the parts of the trail. One of the immigrants wrote, "I am beginning to feel alarmed at the tardiness of our movements and fearful that winter will find us in the snowy mountains of California." So even he had his doubts about how late they left in the trail. Even he thought that they might get caught in the snowy peaks going through the mountains of California at the time. After reaching Wyoming, most of the California-bound travelers would swoop up north and take that northward route through Idaho before coming back down south through the bottom of Nevada. But in 1846, there was a dishonest guidebook author by the name of Lanford Hastings who promoted his own guidebook, which speculated that there was a faster, quicker route that supposedly offered a more faster, more direct, straighter route through the Wasatch Mountains and going through the Salt Lake Desert. There was just one problem with this supposed shortcut in the Hastings cutoff that it was named. No one has ever traveled it with wagons, not even Hastings himself. The Donner Party has multiple wagons and multiple horses, so they're already invested. They have to go through this pass. They have to be the first ones to see that it's even actually doable and feasible to go through this with their wagons and their horses. There was an experienced mountain man in the journey named James Kleiman, and in the end, they did not take his advice, and there was about 20 wagons in this party, and they all ventured off and they went the way of the Hastings Pass, even though that he said that they shouldn't go this way. Obviously, this decision proved disastrous. When they got onto the trail, there was absolutely no trail to begin with. They found that they had to blaze the trail themselves, cutting down trees as they go to actually form the trail itself. Not only did they have to blaze their own trail and cut down the trees, when they were crossing the Salt Lake Desert, the 5-day journey that it was to cross it, pretty much all of them nearly died of thirst and starvation crossing this desert. At insult to injury, the Hastings shortcut was definitely not a shortcut in the least bit. It actually ended up adding another month onto the Donner Party's trip across to the California Trail. Now, despite the Hastings cutoff debacle, most of the pioneers actually did make it to the slopes of the Sierra Nevada mountains right around November of 1846. They literally only had about 100 miles left on their journey, but before the pioneers could bring all 20 of their wagons across the mountains. Literally that same night, they got hit with a huge snowstorm, and it dumped 2, 3, 4 feet of snow down on the ground, snowing them all in, snowing in the mountains, literally right as soon as they got there. A day earlier, the mountain pass roads were super easy, definitely passable, but within just the snap of a finger, now they're icy roadblocks, and the Donner Party had to retreat to a nearby lake. They retreated to Truckee Lake, where they would end up staying there to try and wait out the winter in their cabins and their tents that they had. Now, since they're already a month behind in their journey than what they planned, most of the travelers' supplies, livestock, food, and water is already gone. By this point, we've already had some deaths, and even more people starting to die from the elements and starvation and everything that encompasses from that. Like most pioneer trains back in the day, most of them were filled with young people, kids and young adults. There was 81 people in the Donner Party's kind of pioneer train going across the California Trail. So of the 81 people that were on the Donner Party, there was about 40 or so that were below the age of 18. Most of the people on the Donner Party were kids and small infants. On December 16th, 1846, after a month at being stranded by the snow at Truckee Lake, the Donner Party decided to get 15 of its strongest individuals and send them out on snowshoes to see if they could find help or if they could find the closest town and then rescue everybody else to come back. But after wandering the frozen wasteland for maybe around a week, they were starving and left on the verge of death. All in all, there was no food around, so what they did is they resorted to cannibalism. Of the 15 people that went out, they all resorted to cannibalism, and what they would do is they would almost do a human sacrifice to choose who would want to be sacrificed, or they would set two people to fight against each other, literally to the death, one-on-one, mano-a-mano, fight to the death, and the person that dies, they would end up eating them. Several members of the Donner Party did die of natural causes, but, you know, just like they were eating people that were fighting and being sacrificed, what happened was, as the people that died naturally, they ended up cooking them on the fire and eating them as well. Even though it's nasty and gruesome, I guess, the meat that they ate from these people that they killed and that died naturally, it gave them the energy that they needed. 7 of the 15 people that went out, they actually found a ranch further along than in the California side. These 7 people actually would form a search party and a help party to go back and try and rescue some more, or if not all, of the people left at the Donner Party site. Historians would later dub their desperate hike as the Forlorn Hope. During the Forlorn Hope expedition, the hiking party included 2 Indians named Salvador and Luis. Both of these people had joined up with the Donner Party just shortly before that they had gotten snowbound and stuck in the snow. The natives did not participate in the cannibalism, and in fact they actually were scared that when the actual food ran out for the other people, that they too would become kind of meat on the menu. So they ran off and fearful for their life that they were going to be eaten. The rest of the people from the expedition that were there from the Forlorn Hope hike, they went out and they found them. They found Luis and Salvador about 4 days later. They were both exhausted, completely exhausted, lying in the snow. There was a guy that was part of the hike as well. His name was William Foster, and he went up, loaded his gun, put it to their heads, and shot each of them dead. Go figure, you know what's already going to happen. They killed them and, they ate them as food. Luis and Salvador were butchered, and they were did the same thing as the rest. They were cooked on the fire and eaten as food. During the whole trip, Luis and Salvador, they were the only 2 people that were murdered and used for food, though. Now, not all of the participants in the Donner Party participated in cannibalism, thankfully for that. Although they did have to prepare some pretty grotesque meals, they did not partake in the cannibalism. The remaining survivors that were left at Truckee Lake, they resorted to killing the rest of their pack animals, eating what was left of them. They would take the hides and the different skins from the roof, take them down and boil them in water and try and drain the fat and boil the fat that that would come off of that and eat that. They cooked their dogs, gnawed on leftover bones, pretty much anything and everything that was edible they used, because it was a life or death experience. If they didn't eat, they would die. So they didn't want to eat humans, so they were eating everything else that was possible. So as gross as it is, they actually survived. They survived on the morsels of the bits of leather that they were boiling and of tree bark. They survived until the rescue team actually made it to them in 1847, right around February, March time. Now, as you can imagine, with them being stranded and malnourished, not a lot of the survivors had enough energy to do the treacherous hike out. So what actually happened was the people that had perished and frozen, they were actually forced to eat the frozen people as well. So people that didn't want to partake in cannibalism before were almost forced to partake in it now. And it's said roughly that about 50% of the Donner Party people actually did partake in eating people and partaked in cannibalism. So the crazy thing is, even besides all the cannibalism and all that, the Donner Party, they were there for about 5 months at Truckee Lake, and over half of that time was after they had been rescued, which actually blows my mind. The first relief parties and rescuers made it back to the Donner Party back in February of 1847. They faced the same problem that the Donner Party participants had. The trail was covered in snow, so all of the pack animals and the carts and everything, they were unable to bring them down. So unfortunately, they could only bring what they could carry in their arms, which wouldn't be as much if you had a wagon or pack animals. Like I had mentioned, many of the immigrants were too weak to travel, malnourished, didn't have a lot of energy, and a lot of them perished on the walk out to the mountains. More than 2.5 months and 4 relief teams were needed to help shepherd the survivors of the Donner Party back into civilization. There was one last man to be rescued, and his name was Louis Kesberg. He was a Prussian pioneer who was found in late April of 1847. He was supposedly found half mad and surrounded by all of the corpses of his cannibalized comrades. Kesberg was later accused of killing his companions for food, but all in all, the charges, they were never proven, so he was never charged. Perhaps the most famous person of the Donner Party was a big burly man named John Stark, and he was a part of the 3rd rescue efforts. In early March of 1847, he and 2 other rescuers stumbled upon 11 survivors that were left in the woods in the mountains by a different relief group. Most of these 11 people were small children, so the other 2 rescuers that Stark was with, they each grabbed a child and started hoofing it down the slope, running to get them as fast down as possible to be able to get back up and help Stark bring more people down. But Stark, he didn't want to leave anybody behind. He knew that they were already there for a super long time, and that chances are maybe that if he left somebody, that they might get lost and they wouldn't be found again. He didn't want to take that chance. He grabbed the kids, rallied the adults, and started rallying them to move just single-handedly. What he would do is he would grab 2 of the children, 1 in each arm, run with them for a couple yards, throw them on the ground, run back, pick up 2 more children, do the same thing, and then do that each time, bringing them slowly up to one another. He did that grueling process of picking up kids, running them a few yards, dropping them, going back and picking up more the whole way down the mountain. And he eventually led all the 9 people that were left in charge of him all the way down the mountain to safety. Speaking with one of the survivors of the incident years later, he accredited his survival to 3 people: God, Stark, and the Virgin Mary. Of the 81 people that were in the Donner Party's expedition in the winter in the Sierra Nevada mountains, only about 45 managed to walk out alive. There was 15 solo travelers, and there was only 2 that would survive to the end and make it to be able to get rescued. There were about a dozen families that made up the wagon train of the pioneers going to the California Trail, and by the end of it, only 2 families, by God's grace, got out lucky where they didn't lose anybody. It was the Reeds and the Breens. They were the only 2 families with the Donner Party that managed to get out with all of their family members still intact. I couldn't even imagine going through that ordeal, the decisions that you would have to make, dealing with cannibalism, if you're going to eat people, getting snowed in, trying to get rescued, being rescued, and then still having to find the energy to make it to the mountains, to get down to the other side. Oh, just crazy. I could only imagine. So that's the story of the Donner Party. Super, super crazy story. I read this the first time and I'm like, wow, that is absolutely crazy. Back in the 1800s, this wagon party and all the cannibalism, and I can only imagine what it was actually like when you were there. Probably just super, super crazy, gruesome times. Anyway, there's going to be more stories here on the channel. I'm going to be shooting for at least once a week. Hopefully more coming up here soon. If you want to check out my TikTok, I've been posting different videos as well, shorter stories and more interesting, unique, and different things like that. So muchly appreciate you checking out this video. And I think this is like the 3rd video on the channel. So muchly appreciated. If you like it, give it a big thumbs up and follow along for more. Cheers.